In today's reading, you know the self, by nature one without end. You know the self. You are serene. How can you still desire riches? When from ignorance you see silver in mother of pearl, greed arises. From ignorance of the self, desire arises for the world where the senses whirl. Knowing yourself as that in which all the worlds rise and fall, like waves in the ocean, why do you run about so wretchedly? For have you not heard? You are pure awareness, and your beauty is infinite. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So in some ways, this reading really tells us, doesn't it, the only thing we really need to remember. Most of the time, we spend our days and our evenings and our mornings chasing after something, and we forget that we are infinite beauty, presence, compassion. So in many ways, all of the spiritual traditions are always just trying to get us to always remember this one thing, this one truth about ourselves, this truth that awareness is the foundation of all. And in that awareness itself, there's nothing but beauty, joy, happiness, and peace. And you are that. It's a simple practice if we just remember to do it. So, what does it mean when we take up this kind of practice? It means that throughout all of our experiences from the beginning of the day to the end, until this remembrance becomes our natural state, where we don't forget anymore who we are, then we have to meet all of the challenges that we face throughout a day, or a week, or a month, or an hour, with the remembrance that we're not that. We're not whatever we feel challenged by. We're not whatever failure we think we're facing at that moment. We're not whatever limitation we're experiencing or seem to be experiencing at that moment. That we are something much more vast than that, much more infinite. And this is very hard to do in the midst of our day-to-day living, isn't it? When challenges are popping up left and right, at work, in our relationships, and so on. But this is why I keep saying it's not a difficult practice. It just takes repetition. This reminder that we are infinite in our knowing, infinite in our space, infinite in our wisdom. Even when the mind and the experiences of our day-to-day life might be telling us something quite different from that. And the reason that we do this is because over time, we come to see that every time we meet a challenge, an idea, a thought, an emotion, a situation, a relationship, with this remembrance that we are infinite, loving, kind, and beautiful, we begin to see that the very notions under which we were living before we started this practice begin to shatter. They begin to fall away. That all we have to do is remember. And that when we develop some strength and some stability in this practice or in this awareness that I am that which is aware, infinite, unborn, undying, that when we bring this remembrance to the fore, whatever was there veiling that recognition just dissolves. But in the beginning, and for some time afterward, for most of us, this takes some persistence, doesn't it? The mind just keeps creeping back in, the conditioning keeps creeping back in. The false beliefs that we hold about ourselves keep creeping back in. But over time we learn to keep stilling the mind. We learn not to listen and not to give it power, even if we do listen. Give power to the heart of being, that which we are, before everything else rises. And of course, the way that we become familiar with this is initially we come to somewhere like this, or we read a book, and then we find out that if we make the commitment to sit still for an hour or an hour and a half, as we do here on Sundays, that commitment overrides whatever conditioning comes up during that period of time, doesn't it? That we can have this stuff going around in the mind, even as we sit here. But because we've made the commitment to stay for an hour or stay for an hour and a half, the mind can't even sustain its own chatter. It just gets tired of listening to itself at some point and begins to slow down. And the gaps that are between the chatter begin to spread out. And so we can see, even in a short period of time that we're here, or we're sitting at home maybe, or we're just taking some quiet time on the trail somewhere, we can notice that when we don't feed the thoughts with more thoughts, the sense of presence, of vastness, of untroubled recognition is just here, and it remains longer and longer and longer. Just through the habit of not clinging to whatever is present. So this is why we cultivate this. This is not true just for thoughts. It's also true for whatever is happening at this moment, here in this room or in your life outside of here. Whatever you cling to in your mind, in your heart, in your emotion, in your thoughts, is going to tend to linger. And so we cultivate this habit of not clinging. Not because we feel like it's necessary to get rid of something, but just because we've seen over time that the things that we cling to tend to linger. And those things that we let go of, they go in their own time. Even I do nothing. Just don't cling. Whatever it is that's here at this moment will go. It's the nature of things. Things are like this. They rise, they stay for a period of time, and they go. It's only the awareness of things, or the awareness itself, that remains consistently. And you can know this because you can look back over your experience and you can ask yourself, what was I doing on this day 10 years ago? Who can remember? even it was important at the time. You can't really remember. Now if I say to you, now what happened on this day, which is, and I give you the date, and I tell you the time, and I tell you it's a Sunday, and you can look back and you can pinpoint that day, then you might be able to say, oh, this is what was happening on that day. But you see, you didn't drag it with you all the time, did you? You didn't hold on to it. You didn't cling to it. So we do have a memory. We can bring things up. It's not that we can't use the faculty of memory. It's that we don't depend on it, do we? And so the route to happiness, to knowing who you are, is always to just remain present in this present moment as awareness itself. And don't cling to anything that's happening in this moment any more than you clung to something that was happening in a moment 10 years ago. This too shall pass in the same way that that did. The question is, what knew it then and what knows it now? This is constant. Whether we like what's present in the awareness or not, the awareness itself is constant. It's what's necessarily here for us to have any experience at all. And so most of us think that what is important is the experience. In fact, this is what the world tells us, this is what conditioning tells us, is that the experience is what's significant. But the sages tell us it's not the experience which is significant. It's the awareness which is always present, ever present. And the inquiry is about returning to that over and over until you just remain there. Why do you just remain there eventually? It's because you come to see that it takes a lot of effort to cling to memory, to cling to what's happening in this moment, to try to get your experience to freeze and hold itself because you're enjoying it so much. So I'd like this moment to stay. But you notice that after a while, it takes so much effort to try to get even your happiness to stay that it's exhausting. And that you can't attain true happiness by exhausting yourself, by clinging. However, you can come to recognize that real happiness is ever present, as joy, as bliss, as peace. But even those things, those concepts, joy, peace, happiness, they also will be swept away at some point, so that you can see what you truly are, what remains. It's in this moment that what the sages refer to as bliss is experienced. And this bliss is not a form of happiness, it's not a form of joy that we experience through the natural living of our lives, where we enjoy our families, our children, our work, our neighbors, our experiences. It's just the recognition that we are here. And the here-ness of everything resides in us. This we call bliss. And it's tied together in Vedanta, in the word Sat Chitananda, with being or presence, consciousness, chit, awareness. And by the presence of beingness and consciousness, there is automatically bliss, ananda. So Sat Chitananda. This is the form of being that you are, in your full and complete form. Being, consciousness bliss. This is your nature. And this can be seen presently and directly. When you stop clinging to experience, let go of everything, let it be as it is. You're not trying to change it, just let everything be as it is. And ask this question, who am I?
So if one were to go into that state of seeing themselves as I am that, and maybe feeling that, or believing that they're feeling that, can there be the ego then creeping in and saying, oh, well, can there be like an ego thing that kind of can follow that, even if it's even subtly?
So, have you ever had the experience?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe.
Of knowing in one given moment, just in some way, that you are this unique presence, that you are presence itself. You feel free of everything in that moment.
I've had moments at times that it seemed like that, but I don't know if that was true or if it's just ego.
Well, let's assume for the moment it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Great. Sometimes it comes and then it doesn't. Most of the time it doesn't. It seems that something seems to come in,
and that's something.
And then it leaves.
And that something is?
Well, it's a sense of. It's a feeling of presence, and it feels very strong, and like a power of some kind. Feels like a power.
And what do you think causes it to go? Because you said it seems to come and go.
Oh, life gets there, life happens, or something, or I just forget. I get forgetful. I'm forgetful. So that's what happens, yeah. If that's what's happening.
Okay, so let's assume that's what's happening.
Okay.
Why am I saying that? I've said it twice now. Why am I saying that?
Maybe I should listen to that.
So the reason I'm saying let's assume that that's what's happening is because the mind, the conditioning, is always, for a long period of time, for most people, is going to throw up this veil of ignorance. Mm-hmm. The way that it needs to be referred to. You're calling it ego, but I'm going to refer to it as the veil of ignorance. They are the same thing. Why are they the same thing? Because they're based in conditioning, and the conditioning is based in the belief I am the body, or I am the mind, or I am the emotions. Mm-hmm. Right? These are not the assumption that I am that. Yes?
Yeah.
So in its purest form, you can say that the inquiry is only about recognizing I am not that, the conditioning, the ego. I am that which is free, unborn, undying. Yes? This is the way the mind refers to these things. This is not the direct experience, but we're using words here, so we have to use the words, the concepts, right? So if right now you simply drop all the rest of that, right? You say, oh, yeah, I know that sometimes I waver, I go back and forth, but I'm not that. Fall completely into the assumption. Yes? That you are Sat Chitananda. Right? And this is a tool which is found both in Vedanta and in Buddhism. It's been referred to by the sages as using a thorn to remove a thorn. I think some of you have heard me talk about this before. So as long as the assault is going on in the mind that says, I am the ego, I don't understand, I can't get there from here, whatever the ego is saying, whatever the mind is saying, whatever the conditioning is saying, is happening in the mind, is it not? Since it's happening in the mind and being reinforced by the repetition of that thought, we can interrupt that conditioning or the production of that conditioning, if such a thing is happening, can be said to be happening, by coming to another thought which releases us from that thought which is heading towards supporting conditioning, right? So instead of supporting conditioning, we say, no, I am not that, right? That habit of conditioning the mind. I am Sat Chitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. Or simply I am that, or simply I am, or simply I. Because if we come to the direct understanding of I, that which knows it's here at this moment, right? And is willing to not know anything else. Right? So that's what we're doing by saying, I want to end this conditioning and I'm going to use this tool. I'm going to let go. So are you doing this now as I'm speaking with you? Mm-hmm. Yes. So don't pick up any new concepts here. We're letting go. Right? We're letting go of all these concepts. Only just to keep coming back to knowing I exist. I am. I am. With the mind, this is as far as we can go. Because the first perception mind has is I, or I am. I exist. This is the first concept. Every other concept is dependent upon the concept of I arising. So now I say to you, are you here as I? Now drop I. Are you less here because you've dropped I? Are you more here? So if you drop I in every circumstance in which you find yourself, you come eventually to recognize this awareness is always here. Even I isn't necessary. Now what happens to all the support for me? All the belief in I as a body, as a mind, as these emotions which are flowing through at any moment. Where's the support for them?
You don't really need it.
No, there is no support. You not only don't need it, you see, there is no support for it. So now you can ask yourself the question, if everything in body, mind, and emotion and world is unsupported, is it unconscious or conscious?
It's conscious.
Yes. Absolutely. This consciousness, I am. This can be said. So in a way, to come back to the way that we started this, or what your question was, your inquiry was, what becomes appropriate in terms of understanding completely this, which you are, consciousness. The simplest way it can be put is you lose interest in everything else. Why? Because you give it no support. You see, what you support is what tends to persist. So at some point, you have to lose interest in supporting what you don't want to persist. So if you don't want ego and chaos and drama and so on to persist in awareness, then you lose interest in it. And initially it will persist. There will be a momentum to your conditioning, right? You noticed? There's a momentum to this conditioning that we're talking about. But when there's no support for conditioning, then the only momentum there is the support for the unconditioned. And then to move beyond the duality of unconditioned or conditioned into simply what is. This awareness, this being, consciousness. So it can be worthwhile to have this conversation with yourself. What is it that I'm interested in supporting? Yes? In my experience. And we do this, right? I mean, we do this all the time in the world, right? We make decisions about, I'm going to buy this because not only do I need it, but it supports the planet. It supports the environment to buy this product rather than this product, or to not buy this product because it does not support the environment. So we make these kinds of decisions about where we live, about our car, about all sorts of things every day. So I'm not pointing that you should do something that you're not already familiar with. But we never really ask ourselves that question. What am I supporting with this line of thinking, this line of belief? And do I want to continue to support that? Do I need this in some way? And if the answer comes back that I do need to continue to try to support some way of false thinking in the mind, then we can ask ourselves why. Because this may also be a question we have to answer. Why do I choose to support these negative experiences in my life? Why do I choose to support things which harm myself and harm others as well? Why do I support that within myself? What do I gain by keeping this conditioning going, by supporting it, by clinging to it and holding on to it and saying, no, I can let everything else go, but not this. Not this belief. I have to hold this one. I can let every other belief go, but I have to keep this one. Yes? Then ask yourself, what do I gain from this? What is it that I think I'm going to... And typically, what's going to happen is we're going to discover that there's some aspect of personal identity that's being held on to. And it's the last thing, in some way, which maybe is preventing us from letting go completely and experiencing the freedom of living without support, without concepts. Just here now. In this beingness. Without attachment to whether things stay or go. Why? Because we lose interest in there being anyone who's attached to anything. We no longer want to live our life through the concepts of our mind. So we become willing to investigate what is really here. We do this by coming constantly back to this I stance, this I recognition. I am. Until we find that we're not even willing to support the I am thought. And in that moment we recognize that even without the I am thought, this awareness is here. And not only is it here, it begins to flower and to bloom in everything. And now we begin to see that everything is consciousness. Now what do we need to be afraid of? Cling to, push away. What? What? So it's very good, you know. You just keep showing up here, each one of you, but also you, Rosemary, just keep showing up here and asking these questions so that we can keep returning to this isness, this suchness which is behind the mind, which can't be figured out by the mind, which can only be seen directly when the mind is dropped. And when the questions of the mind are left just to lie wherever they rise. And when we do this repeatedly, we begin to notice that this stillness or this awareness or this consciousness which we are, this recognition, without putting a label on it, is always here. So whatever is rising for you in this moment, just come back to I am here. Don't pick anything up.
Rishi, I think a lot of times the practicalities of life can get in the way.
Yes. Yes.
It seems the practicalities of life.
Yes, if the practicalities of life didn't get in the way for you all the time, I wouldn't need to sit here every Sunday.
Yeah, like I need a place to live and things like that.
Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.
Whose are these?
Whose are these?
These things, these practicalities of life. Who do they belong to?
To this body.
And who does this body belong to?
The earth.
Then let the earth support it.
That's tricky.
Why?
Because if I walked around saying, "Oh, I'll just let the earth support me," nothing would ever happen and get done. I might
And
be
if you
living in a
didn't-
deluded frame of mind.
And if you didn't, and if no one had ever put those concepts into your mind, if you had to live completely free of those concepts, you had no mind in which to hold those concepts, then what?
I don't know.
Yes, you don't know. So start there. Do you understand that?
Yeah, but I don't know that I trust that.
Ah. So then you have two choices. Either you trust the earth, God, the universe, whatever your frame of reference is around this, the mother, the father, either you trust that completely or you don't. You see, there's no middle ground with this in that regard. There's no middle ground.
So does that mean I never go food shopping? I never, those are the practicalities,
No, that's not what it means. I'm asking you, though, to go much, much deeper than the practicalities of it. You see, the practicalities are things that everyone is going to have to take care of no matter what.
Yeah, it takes planning and thinking ahead.
Really? What if you didn't hold that concept?
I'm afraid nothing would ever get done.
So then this concept finds itself in the I, doesn't it? In the story of me.
Yes, the me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the me needs a roof. And things like that, yeah.
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 So somehow there's a belief underneath there, right? That says, without a me, I is doomed. Yes? Then this is where you have to begin to challenge. Because you know this isn't true, right? You definitely know this isn't true. The way you know this isn't true is that every time I direct you back to the I, you say, oh, and I can watch you relax. But you can only wait there for a few moments or a couple of minutes. As long as we keep our attention focused here together, you're able to stay there. But within a moment or two, the me rises again.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not doubting at all that that's what's happening.
That's what's happening.
Yes. What I'm suggesting to you is that doesn't resolve the situation ultimately. So, as long as there's a me that says, I have to, then chances are you have to. So whatever it is, move, find a house, get a job, go shopping, plan ahead. As long as there's a me, then honor that. Also, don't believe it. Because this is the beginning of being able to trust the I rather than the me. Right? One of the things you could do right now is begin to notice that when you move from the I position or the I experience, direct perception of I, to the me, this takes a great deal of effort.
Or forgetfulness.
Well, all right.
In my case.
Your word,
I'm
forgetfulness.
not trying to run back to me, but I forget. It's forgetfulness.
So maybe the effort isn't just in the belief that there is a me, though.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is the foundation of the approach that I took earlier with you.
Yeah.
Was just to try to show directly that as soon as you begin to be willing to just for a few moments loosen up your grip on the belief in me,
Mm-hmm.
then you can begin to see I as a foundation place, right? As a foundation place, a place where you can stand just for a moment. That place is free of me. This I, which simply says I exist, or I am here, it is free of the whole me story. This is the reason I keep moving you back to it.
Yeah.
To give you this direct perception that you are free of the me story, even for just a moment.
Mm.
Because you feel the freedom in it, right? Your heart feels it, your mind feels it. There's the direct perception, I am. And I don't need anything else. I'm resting here as this, I am. Now I don't need anything. In this moment, right? I'm not talking about next moment.
Yes, okay.
I'm talking about this moment. If you are truly here in this moment, what do you need? If there is no future and there is no past, what do you need? Or what do you need to get rid of? You see? You're just here in this freedom of now. Everything that you need is here now. So understand that the yeah, but, what about me? This belongs to the mind. Does not belong to the now. The now doesn't need a me. It doesn't even need an I. We just use the I because that's the furthest, the strongest, furthest back, if you will, I don't know how to say it, reference point that we can perceive directly through our experience, I am, or I exist, through the felt bodily experience, I exist, brings us back behind the mind, which is where the me lives. Right? So we keep doing this. We keep coming back behind the mind. But this doesn't work or it doesn't help us to see what's real if we aren't willing for a moment, even for a moment, to suspend the belief in me. There has to be a willingness to suspend that belief in me. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that at some point, right, you don't walk out of here and need to go shopping and have to reach in your bag and pull your shopping list out and hope you have enough money. But even then, you go through that whole dance. Is it necessary for there to be a me? Or is it just the dance of life at that moment? You see it as this constant return to that everything that's happening here is personal. This keeps us bound. Mm-hmm. Rather than this is just life happening spontaneously, of its own accord. See, I don't need a me for that either. The dance is going to dance. We know this because we're here. How did we get here, if not for the dance? You see? All of this is just happening. What does this have to do with me? Nothing. You see, there is no me. So now go about doing your shopping and looking for a place to live and doing whatever you're doing, but do it all without me. As much as possible, stand in I, in the experience I exist, in the knowledge I exist, not in the perception me. Needs this, needs that, doesn't need this, doesn't need that, wants this, doesn't want that. You see, life will lead us as it needs to. Why? Because we are it. Yes? So try this. This is a continuous unraveling that's happening in the midst of our experience. It's not a substitute for our experience. It's coming to understand the nature of our experience and what is behind it. Where is the experience rising from? And this is why we come back to I. Because I is the furthest point that the mind can comprehend before it steps into infinite emptiness. So just keep it up. So do all the other things that you're doing, but use them as the ways of coming back to I. Let everything that you're doing remind you not of me and my condition and my situation, but of I, which is prior to all of the situation, all of the experiences. I is always here. I is here waking, dreaming, and sleeping. I knows it slept well or didn't sleep well when it wakes up, even when mind wasn't present. So now we're just keeping this process going for a period of time until we naturally fall into this space and stay there. Don't be afraid to dance. Just lose interest in it. And those of you who are dancers, and I know a lot of people here go to ecstatic dance and stuff before you come here. So those of you who are dancers know that this is the secret to that as well. Right? I doesn't dance. Dancing dances. Yes? Then you know something about who you are in the dance. So, do this for everything.
A while ago you talked about falling through the body,
Yes.
and I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, because the experience of Sat Chit Ananda feels like an experience that the body is having. And I understand having the sensations of the body not supporting me, that it can happen, the sensations happen without this me. But it still appears that I'm experiencing being, consciousness, bliss in a body.
Do you not experience being, consciousness, bliss? Or do you not know that you are being, consciousness, bliss when there is no body present?
I don't know that.
Is the body always present?
It appears so.
In deep sleep? Is the body present?
I think so.
No, I didn't ask you if you thought so. I didn't ask you to make it up. Is the body present when you fall into deep sleep? You're in deep sleep. Do you know that you have a body?
I don't know.
So you don't know if you have a body.
I don't know about my experience when I'm in deep sleep.
Do you know you exist?
Right now I do, but I
No,
don't.
in deep sleep.
I don't know. I don't have a memory or like a knowing of my experience in deep sleep.
And yet, when you wake up in the morning, first thing,
You know whether you've slept well.
you know whether you slept well or you didn't. What is that? What is that knowing?
Awareness, watching the body sleep.
Okay, that's coming out of your mind. I want you to just drop into your body. You said that your body is the place of Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. It's the place you experience it, right? So drop fully into your presence as you experience it in the waking state. Is there awareness of sensation?
Mm-hmm.
Is that where Satchitananda resides? Or is there something before that? So is that knowing self-existent, or is it dependent upon the sensations in the body?
It's before the sensations.
Before the sensations. So it's that knowing then can be said it's similar to when you go into deep sleep. You're willing to let go of all the sensations, all the experiences, all the thoughts. You do this willingly every night. Knowing somehow that it's okay because you are. That even with the loss of the body and the sensations and so on, you not only know it's okay, you crave this every single night. This release from the sensations, the mind, the emotions. Returning back to the prior state in which nothing is known by the mind, and yet I am remains. If this were not the case, you would be in terror every single night when you went to sleep. Or you would wake up in the morning having not gone to sleep in terror, but not knowing who you were. Right? There would be no sense of continuity from the state just prior to deep sleep and waking up from deep sleep. There would be no sense of continuity. So where is that continuity? What is that coming from? If that continuity is there now, is it? That sense of continuity is there. And it's there prior to deep sleep and it's there after deep sleep. Is it also possible it's there before birth and after death? What is that? Not with your mind. Fall into it. See, in some ways, all we can do is keep falling back away from our ideas. It's always the ideas, the thoughts, the thinking, which is held in the mind, or felt as sensation in the body, or felt as emotion in the body. It's always that which moves us further and further and further into the belief structure we call me or mine. So in some ways it can be said, all we can do in this circumstance, if our intention is to know who we are, to wake up from the dream, to stop living in ignorance, is to keep falling back from the mind's conditioning. And it doesn't make any difference what the conditioning is. Whether for one person the conditioning is, without the sensation in my body, I don't know anything. For another, it's a belief structure around me and mine. all of it is a belief structure around me and mine, but for each person it seems a little bit unique in some way for that individual. But for all of us, it's the same disease. And so the medicine is always the same, regardless of how the symptoms manifest in your particular case. Whatever's creating dis-ease for you, whether it's in the mind or the body or the emotions or your experience in the world. The medicine is always the same. You have to take it, however. Can't just sit on the shelf. You have to keep saying, what is this? What am I believing here? Why am I living out of this belief structure? See? What's before this? This thought, this belief, this conditioning, so on. What's before this? And if I drop every single belief I have that this is happening in my mind, in my body, in the world, blah, 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 in consciousness, that this is happening for real, if I drop every belief structure, do I cease to exist? Do you? Can you sit here? You're all sitting here like this. It's beautiful. A lot of you are very empty-headed right now. Have you ceased to exist? Now, at some point, the body will cease to exist. There's no doubt about this, because it's mind structure anyway. So the body will eventually leave. But that which is here now is always here now. Whether it's in this body or another body, it's here now. So that's very good. Whenever the mind is telling us that anything in our experience is dependent upon anything else in our experience, we need to question that. Not run around trying to prove it, trying to prove what the mind is telling us about the experience, but rather questioning whether the mind can be trusted at all in that experience, in our experience. And whether it might be the belief that we're holding in a my or a me, or in the body, or the perception of the body experience, or in the world. This is always what we're doing. We're falling back into empty space. Not because it's completely empty, but because we want to discover what's there. If there is anything there. What's before. All the belief structures which are limiting us in our expression or in our experience. In this moment.
Every time I turn back and look at one, I watch one come up and I turn back around and look at it, it just dissolves. Every time.
Yeah.
But then there's ones that are just like basic assumptions that you can't even see. They're like in your peripheral vision. You can't even see them. Like this idea that the sensations in my body are real is so fundamental. It didn't even know there was an edge to it.
Yeah. just keep letting everything dissolve. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritawa Svaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung Hang Om. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste.